Hello, everyone. I am Doron Spielman. This is January 13th, 2025. It is now 465 days that 98 people, including 2 young children, women, and elderly, are still in Hamas brutal captivity. This is the live daily briefing of the Israeli Citizen Spokesperson's office. Start sending your questions in the chat, and I will do what I can to answer them at the end. There are reports that there is a hostage deal with Hamas and that it's close. Until there is an official announcement, we are all left with unverified reports and anonymous updates. We're praying, but we have to try to uncover the facts. This is what everyone needs to know. Hamas could have released those hostages at any time and this war would have ended. Instead, Hamas kept our hostages in its terror dungeons for over a year. Why? Because Hamas wants to be in a position to rule Gaza forever and carry out more October 7th massacres. An Israeli source recently said that a 3-stage deal to release the hostages held by Hamas terrorists in Gaza has been reached and that parties are awaiting Hamas's response. Now, we hope that Hamas will stop with its refusals. Of course. Israel, in fact, sent a high-level delegation to Qatar to free the hostages. Qatar is representing Hamas in the negotiations, and they have been since the beginning. Outgoing and incoming US Presidents Biden and Trump, probably in a first ever, both sent representatives because they care as well. The Biden White House said, "We've made some progress, but Hamas continues to create obstacles at the negotiating table." In fact, over the last year, every single hostage deal has been rejected by who? By Hamas. Days ago, Hamas claimed they didn't even know where many of our hostages were. They even refused to tell us what hostages were alive until after Israel agrees to a deal. Would anyone agree to a deal in which they don't know what they're getting in return until after they agree? Would you? I know I wouldn't, especially with a brutal terror organization like Hamas. The bottom line, Hamas was broken on the battlefield, and now they're using our hostages, men and women, living people, so that they can guarantee to continue to rule, to further their charter. And if you read it, it calls for one thing: Israel's destruction. A few words now about the situation in Lebanon. The only thing keeping the Israeli people safe from Hezbollah is the Israeli army. Unfortunately, Hezbollah continues to transport weapons in southern Lebanon, weapons that it wants to use to murder Israelis. Now, the ceasefire deal with Hezbollah requires that Hezbollah disarm. Israel reported to the so-called ceasefire monitoring mechanism that it saw Hezbollah moving weapons and putting them in places and aiming them where it could have killed Israeli civilians. The monitors, which includes France, Lebanon, and the United Nations, did the same thing they did before Hezbollah's war against Israel began on October 8th, 2023. Can you guess? It's one word: nothing. So Israel took action. Last night, Israeli fighter jets struck a Hezbollah rocket launcher, a military site, and arms smuggling routes on Syria's border. The United Nations isn't stopping Hezbollah. Lebanon's army is not stopping Hezbollah. France is not living up to its obligations to stop Hezbollah. The only thing stopping Hezbollah is Israel. And that's why Israeli troops have not completely left southern Lebanon. In order to stop Hezbollah from firing rockets and missiles like the one that killed Tamar Edrei, a 75-year-old woman, a mother, a grandmother, who just today, after battling for over a month, succumbed to her wounds. Our condolences go out to her families. But what we can tell her family and the people of Israel and people around the world, and most importantly, Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran, Israel will not return to the reality before October 7th, 2023, or to October 7th, when Hamas attacked, or to October 8th, when Hezbollah joined the Hamas war. Israel demands peace and safety, not empty promises. I'm ready now to take some questions for our audience that's watching live on social media.
Thank you. Our first question comes from Shayna on Instagram. If there's going to be a hostage deal and a ceasefire in Gaza, does this mean that the Houthis will stop firing ballistic missiles at Israel? What should we expect to see from the Houthis in the future?
Well, let's just put this in perspective, Shayna. The war that Hamas launched in Israel, in which it massacred Israeli civilians and took innocent people to be hostages in Gaza, is more than 1,000 kilometers, much more than 1,000 kilometers from the Houthis. What did the Houthis have to do with Hamas? They're across the world. They're nowhere even in this area. The reason that the Houthis joined into the foray is for one reason. They're a proxy of Iran. They're a puppet of Iran, who is dedicated to terror. They've been fighting Saudi Arabia. They've been fighting the United States, and now they're fighting Israel. So if you ask me if the Houthis will lay down their weapons because hopefully Israel will get its hostages back home, it depends on one thing, on what Iran tells them to do, and if they continue to believe in their terror creed, which calls for the destruction of Israel. Remember, the Houthis, we had no beef with the Houthis. We never had any interaction with the Houthis. They simply joined the foray because they are another arm of terror. This should not only concern Israel, it should concern you. Just one more thing I want to add is that the Houthi terror regime has stopped international shipping along those straits, which has drastically affected the world economy. You are now paying additional money to buy milk for your children, to buy meat in the store, simply because of the Houthis. Their attack's not just against Israel, it's against the free world. Thank you for your question, Shayna.
Our next question comes from Elle on Instagram. Will the Iranian regime try to rebuild its ring of fire around Israel? How will Israel be able to deal with this threat if it's committed to a ceasefire?
Once a terrorist, always a terrorist. You have to ask yourselves, do you think that Hamas is going to turn over a new leaf and begin sending flowers to the Israeli victims that they've killed? Probably not. Iran is a regime that is an Islamic radical regime that follows very specific sections of the surah, of the code, of that Islamic law is adhering to, which is a subset of the Quran, which calls for the forced conversion of any infidel to Islam up until death. That is their creed. If you want to read their charter, that is the creed of the Iranian regime. As long as Iran exists, people all around the world should understand what we're dealing with. We are dealing with a regime that will stop at nothing until the entire world bends over and accepts the creed of radical Islam that they are pushing. So you ask me, do I think that Iran is going to stop what they're doing? Absolutely not. How will Israel respond if there's a ceasefire? Well, Israel has said from the very, very beginning, we will always do what is necessary to defend our people. And I think we've shown that. Since October 7th, Israel's been fighting a war on 7 fronts, and we have decimated Iran's proxies, which they spent 2 decades and hundreds of billions of dollars building. From the Houthis to Hamas to Hezbollah, to leaders like Nasrallah, Yahya Sinwar, Muhammad Dief, all of whom, including more, that have met their final demise. Israel knows how to defend itself and will continue to do so. However, the rest of the world needs to be looking at this regime and understanding Israel just happens to be in close proximity. Iran has its eyes set around the world. They are the largest global sponsor of terror. So I think that the entire world needs to ask not how Israel's going to defend itself. How is the world going to defend itself?
Thank you. Our next question comes from David. The hostage negotiations have been taking place in Qatar. What do you make of Qatar's role mediating between Israel and Hamas?
I think that Qatar is a mediocre mediator, meaning Qatar is a regime that plays both sides of the field. Qatar hosts the largest United States military base in the entire Middle East. It's located in Qatar, mostly because of its proximity to Iran. However, Qatar is also a conduit of the terror regime in Iran. Remember, pre-October 7th, where did Hamas get its money from? It was funneled from Iran to Qatar and was delivered in briefcases in cash to Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Qatar is playing both sides of the field. Now, the degree to which you can trust a mediator that you know does not really have your best interests in mind, but is also a party to the largest terror sponsor in the entire world, one that is aligned with Russia and North Korea and China. We've always seen Qatar as a mediocre negotiator. However, we're looking forward to the United States pressure on Qatar. We see that pressure having played out in that the Hamas leadership, which was living in Qatar, many of whom have been forced to leave. And we hope that Qatar is going to make a decision Do you want to be on the axis of evil? Do you want to be in bed with Iran, North Korea, Russia, and China? Or do you want to be part of the free world, support freedom and liberty and human rights, and be on the side of the United States, Israel, and much of Europe? That's the question that we have at hand.
Thank you, Doron. This is our final question. Gilly on Instagram asks, do you think that the Lebanese government and Lebanese army will ever disarm Hezbollah? Will Israel be fighting Hezbollah on its own forever?
I think that we have to be very, very clear. Hezbollah is a problem for Israel, of course, but we know how to defend ourselves. Hezbollah is a problem for the people of Lebanon. If the Lebanese government and the Lebanese army are interested in protecting their own people, then we would think that they would try to disarm and destroy the terror organization that has completely infiltrated into their land, has occupied southern Lebanon, has turned their cities into basically army bases with people living on top of them, that has crushed the Lebanese economy to when they're in one of the biggest deficits in world history for any country, that has infiltrated into their government, that has wreaked havoc on the Lebanese people. So I think the question is not whether they're going to do this for Israel and if we want to be fighting in Lebanon. Of course, we don't want to be fighting in Lebanon. We didn't start the war with Hezbollah, nor do we have any interest to be fighting Hezbollah. However, I hope for the Lebanese people, the Lebanese army will stand up and defend its own people against a terror regime that is holding them hostage. Thank you for your questions. My name again is Doron Spielman. Every day, the Israeli Citizen Spokesperson's office has a daily briefing at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard, Israel time, 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Stay tuned. You can carry us and watch us on all of your various podcasts, on YouTube, on everywhere else that you're following. We're here for you, bringing you the best news in real time. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Drop a comment below. Don't forget to like, share, and hit subscribe to stay updated with our latest content. Until next time, stay informed and inspired. This is Dejobnik signing off.